so happy to have many international guests with us here today. And there are people in charge of Copernicus and service providers that you will meet during the conference. And now I'm happy to introduce Mr. Mauro Facchini from the European Commission. Mauro is a really nice guy. He's probably the kindest EU official I have ever met. You should know that.
Never trust.
Mauro has been working with research projects at the EU level for quite some time and has also been involved in the drafting of the EU space policy, so he knows what he talks about. Now he's back as head for the Copernicus office at the Commission, DG Grow, and most welcome.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the invitation, Jürgen. Thank you very much for organizing this meeting. I didn't understand a single word of what you said in the beginning, apart from Copernicus. And my Swedish is quite limited, apart from good dag, maybe, and tack at the end of my presentation. So, again, I think that it's not usual that I move from my office these days, I can tell you. So I'm very happy to be here in this very nice city. And I hope that what I will present you today, I think will give you more understanding of what we are doing, but I think the content of what we are doing will be given by next speakers after me. In order to prepare to my come to Sweden, I was 10 days ago to a Swedish baptism in Brussels with friends, and so I was already involved in this kind of atmosphere where I am today. It was very nice, by the way. It was quite impressive. So, Copernicus, Europe's eye on Earth. I have plenty of time today, so I'm very happy. I don't have to rush. I've more than half an hour to speak. So, Europe's eye on Earth is the tagline that we use for the program at this moment. And as you see, I'm from the European Commission. DG CRO is the DG that is responsible for running space policy and also the Copernicus program and the GNSS program that was mentioned in the previous presentation. And so, why did we start to do Copernicus? So my presentation is really giving the frame and also tackling with the main issues that are open at this moment with the evolution of this program. Why? Thank you. Why the European Commission is involved in space? There is already European Space Agency, national space agencies, so why are we there? It is because we have responsibilities for some policies and we feel that space can help in these matters. So you can see here many issues. So protect people and assets, increase general knowledge of the planet, monitor the environment, and so on and on. And last but not least, what was mentioned before now, all this crisis about border frontiers of Europe, and so also this issue of immigration that might be quite important. So we decided, let's get involved in that. So at the beginning of 2003, 2004, we entered into that frame, and after a while we managed to introduce in the Lisbon Treaty a new article that was not existing before. It's Article 189, if you wish to go there. And for the first time, the European Commission, or let's say European Union to be more precise, as a competence in space matters. And under the frame of this, Copernicus as born. Just the current status, but most of the things written here will be considered later. So we are now with the Copernicus regulation, so it's a piece of legislation that is covering the deployment of Copernicus in the period 2014-2020 with a budget of 4.3 billion euros. Thanks God I'm not thinking about these figures every night, because I can tell you, if I do, I will not sleep. But I think to be on the positive side, I think it's an honor. I think it's if we are here today, it's thanks to the work of many people. All the work in preparation of Copernicus, so previously known GMES, starting in '98. It was a dream of some forward-looking people. And if we are here today, I think it's also to the commitment of many people in this frame. And so I'm proud actually to run this program on their behalf, if I may say. So this money is ensuring operations until 2020 and is setting out a long-term plan for Earth observation space components. So full, free and open access to data, as was mentioned before, but I'll go back to this later. Starting successful launches of some of the Sentinels, 1A and 2A were launched. And for the space component, funds delegated to European Space Agency and EUMETSAT. And at the same time, 5 services are already operational, with 3 that are expected to come soon. This is more or less from the European Union side what has been the investment. It's true that this is complementing what other entities put on the plate, in particular European Space Agency. But just to show you that it started as a research activity, mostly funded under FP6 and FP7, so the Framework Program for Research 6 and 7. There were preparatory action. There was a phase of 3 years called GIO, is GMES Initial Operations. And this opened the way to this new regulation that I mentioned before, covering period 2014-2020, where we are really getting into the operations with this funding of 4.3 billion. This is the architecture. It's very simple. So we have all these elements. You have the Sentinels on one side, so some satellites that are specifically built and launched for Copernicus. I think is an unprecedented and not existing anywhere constellation of Earth observation satellites. Contributing missions, meaning that we don't have just our own satellites, but contributing missions meaning satellites owned by European agencies or even worldwide agencies where we can buy data in order to feed our services. And then the services, that, and on that I will come back later, that are covering different parts of knowledge and giving different kind of information. But satellite data are not sufficient. They have to be combined with some other data that are collected on ground. And this is what we call the in situ element. So fusing everything together is getting into these black boxes, so these services, and producing added value products that could be used by many entities and communities of users. Or in some cases, be used also by some intelligent, if I can say that, companies, in particular small and medium enterprise, to create even added value products and make business out of that. So let's start with the infrastructure. Satellites. So the Sentinels are currently developed. They will consist of 6 different families, called Sentinel-1 to Sentinel-6. And 2 Sentinels have been already launched. So Sentinel-1A has been launched last year, and Sentinel-2A has been launched this year. And they are providing data, and I think that Bianca tomorrow probably will explain to you some of how these things are ongoing. Bianca Hirsch from ESA. And then the ground segment, we are also working into that because it's not sufficient just to produce the data, but also to make this data available and to distribute the data, because sometimes this can be the problem. So you generate a full amount of data, but then the data are somewhere and you cannot access. So this is really an area where investing a lot of energy in order to improve the situation. To summarize, these are more or less the contents of and the scopes of the different Sentinels. So Sentinel-1, that is a radar imaging satellite. As I said, Sentinel-1A has been already launched. I say A because in the end, the satellites, most of them, so at least 1, 2, and 3 are foreseen to flight in couples. So version A will be followed by version B. So Sentinel-1A will be followed by Sentinel-1B next year. So these are radar imaging, and it being a radar, it can work on all weather day and night applications. Sentinel-2, optical imaging, in particular land application, urban, forest, agriculture, but not limited to that. Actually, applications are already foreseen, but some will appear even more evident when all the data will be used. Then Sentinel-3 and 6. So Sentinel-3A is expected to be launched at the end of this year. In December, we're expecting confirmation for the launch. And these will look mostly at the global level of our So they are looking at ocean and global land monitoring, and Sentinel-6, in part also Sentinel-3 high precision ocean altimetry. And then Sentinel-4 and 5, that will be mostly dedicated to the observation of the atmospheric composition, and so mostly be in support of atmosphere analysis and also climate change issues. So Sentinel-4 will be a geostationary satellite, while Sentinel-5 will be a polar orbiting satellite. Yes, this is half of Copernicus. You will see the other half later, where you see how we are structured. So the Copernicus program is run by the European Commission as a program manager. And then this is speaking about the Copernicus space component, and you see that the governance of that, so we have the delegation agreement with the European Space Agency and the delegation agreement with EUMETSAT. Each one of the two entities is responsible for the operation of some of these sentinels. It's a quite complicated structure, but if needed I can get into details later. But I think it's a way to show that the European Commission is really managing the overall program, but the technical management and the technical operations are not kept by the European Commission, but they are delegated to competent entities. And the same, you will see, will apply also for the different services. So you see ESA and EUMETSAT. And at the same time, we are also looking, you see at the right-hand side, at the requirements for the space component. So how these satellites will have to evolve in the future. Because today we are happy with the satellites that have been already launched, with those that have to be launched. But technology is running and requirements are changing in time. So we have actually to improve what we can provide with our satellites. And as the preparation time for new satellites satellites is not built from one day to the other. I think I learned myself that it's something in the range between 5 and 10 years. If we want to already to think about the next generation of satellites after 2025, is now that we have to start. This is a plan of the launches, summarizing. So you see some of these that have been launched. So in 2014, you see Sentinel-1A. In 2015, you see that Sentinel-2A has been launched and 3A foreseen for the end of this year. And then you see the plan for the launch of all the other satellites. I didn't do the exact calculation, but I think that between 2020 we will have between 9 and 10 satellites flying. Maybe it's not exactly the right number, but this is the idea. And in any case, you see that the program has a long life foreseen in order to ensure the availability of data at least until the end of 2030, and already thinking of what will come next. On the left-hand side, you see the launch by the Soyuz launcher of Sentinel-1A of last year from Kourou in French Guyana. Sentinel-2A, just to show you, these are some of the first pictures that have been generated by Sentinel-2A. If I'm not wrong, this is more or less north of Italy, northwest of Italy, and but you have in different colors, so different frequencies that have, so with different kind of usage. For example, the last one on the right, on the bottom, can clearly be used for agriculture possibilities in order to understand better the land use with the different fields. But these are just few images, and I imagine that other presentation will be more detailed on these aspects. This is giving you an idea on how the use of the data is increasing. So it's still an old statistic, because I think it's 18th of June, and it refers just to Sentinel-1, because at that moment statistics of Sentinel-2 were not available, and I think they will start soon. But you see the number of registrations, so the registered users per continent, and the number of downloads in the first 5 months of 2015. You see that the biggest users for Sentinel-1 data are Europe and North America. And on the right-hand side, you see the number of registered users opening registration since the 30th of March 2014. And it's normal that there has been a big increase at the moment of Sentinel-1 availability of data, and we expect that with the availability of the other data, this will increase even more. And as I said, this statistics is already old of a few months, so the statistics are even more impressive at this moment. After speaking about so the space infrastructure, so the satellites and the data provided, I move to the services. We speak about 6 services. So if you have to remember a number, today is number 6. So 6 Sentinels, 6 services. This is making life easier. What is making life more difficult is that it's not one Sentinel per service, but it's more a mixing of capacities. So every service might use different data from different Sentinels. So we decided to structure, for simplicity, in 6 services. 3 that are looking to the physical parameters of the Earth, so land, marine, atmosphere. So they generate products related to these 3 fields of physical parameters. And then 3 other that are more, I would say, cross-cutting, meaning using different of these parameters or having specific application. Climate change, monitoring, Copernicus, emergency management, and security service. So I will try to explain a little bit, very briefly, what is in this, because again, next presentations will give more details about these elements. Yes, this is the second half of the picture you have seen before, because this is looking to Copernicus services. So Commission is already there, program manager, and as before, we delegated to EUMETSAT and ESA the implementation of the operation of the satellites. Here you see how we deal for the governance of the services. So you see the 6 services that I mentioned before, and the entities to whom we delegate the activities. So the land, we delegate, actually we split that into parts. The pan-European and local components is delegated to European Environment Agency, and there will be a presentation later by European Environment Agency. Global land is with the JRC, that is a specific Directorate General of the European Commission. So Alan Delwert and my colleagues will present you later how this is run. Then the emergency management service, I don't think will be discussed today, but again, it is also delegated to the JRC, so to the Joint Research Center, and even also this one is split into components. One is the mapping. Thank you. Yes, one is the mapping, and one is the early warning system. So this is anticipate an event, and this is producing maps after an event has happened. Then the atmosphere monitoring service has been delegated to ECMWF. The marine environment monitoring service has been delegated to Mercator Océan, and so for these you will have one presentation later on atmosphere, one presentation on marine, and the climate change monitoring service has been as well delegated to ECMWF, and you will have also presentation on this part. Then we have this, and when I said before that we have 5 services working and 3 still to come, the 3 still to come are these ones, because we are finalizing negotiations with Frontex, that is a new agency for border surveillance, with EMSA, that is the EU Agency for Maritime Surveillance, and then with the Satellite Center of Torrejon in Spain for the external action support. This one is actually signed in these days, so I think that in 1 week time or a couple of weeks time, this will be in its operation, let's say, will be officially starting its operational stage. This is, we are finalizing the negotiations, and I hope it will be signed also in the next week, and this we expect to sign it at the beginning of next year. This is giving more or less what has been the plan in the implementation of all these services, and you see that actually all these already enter the operational phase, meaning that the contract that has been in place is clear that the ramp-up phase is needed, but these actually are still in their finalization and starting phase. These are a little bit delayed with respect to what was foreseen. And also climate change is ongoing. Yes, I forgot to say that in situ part, I didn't mention that, in situ part is not really financed by the program, but because we trust on the capacity of member states to provide with their networks capacities and additional information, and European Environment Agency is beyond being responsible for the pan-European and local elements of land. They are also responsible for the in-situ coordination for the program. So, land monitoring service, very, very briefly. So we cover everything, from global to local. So from global, we look to the whole world, and it will be shown later what we can do in that respect. Pan-European, we have different layers that are looking mostly on our continent to see what can be done. And then we can look in some details, some elements, so looking locally. And one example is, for example, to look to urban areas and to produce maps on urban evolution of some areas. So, for example, we have maps for all the 300 cities, I think, in Europe, so where we have also the urban evolution of these cities. I will not detail again because colleagues will do that later. Marine, even here will be very brief, just to summarize. We are looking at different parameters, so we can see sea level, biogeochemistry, salinity, temperature, currents, and many other. And we can see these at different levels, so we have divided in areas, so we have the global component, so looking to that globally, but then some other parts that have been identified. And so we have global and regional analysis, real-time reanalysis, and satellite and in-situ observation that could be integrated in models. The only thing about this, and because Pierre will speak much better than me about this, is that it's possible to follow the number even for the service of subscribers. Even this one is old. I don't know if you will have yes. So there will be a more updated statistics, but just to show you how the number of users are really increasing. This was already at the moment when the service was at a project level, still at the level of MyOcean, but you see how it's increasing, and we expect that here there will be even higher increase with the operationality of the service. Atmosphere, again, very quickly, some of the elements that are provided by the service. So you have air quality forecast, reanalysis, observation stratospheric zone, UV information, global forecast, emissions. So giving to you really many information. It was started with the MAC and many other projects, and now it's getting into an operational service, and the products group that are generated in the service. You can have regional products, global products, and other. But in order to be more precise, I prefer that this will be covered by my colleagues dealing with that element from ECMW. Climate change service. This is something new in a sense that it will be in the ramping up phase. The objective is to monitor the climate system, so to look how our climate is changing. And also to detect climate change behaviors to allow some projections. And we feel that with Earth observation, this is clear because some elements can be observed globally, and satellites can be really helpful in this respect. And by the way, there has been also recently a resolution by the European Parliament asking for the use of satellites and the observation system in order to support climate change observation. And then also another possibility is to assess the impact of and support of adaptation to climate variability and change. So what are we doing is starting from space and in situ observation. Then we we collect and we create climate data and reanalysis, and with that it's also possible to have climate models and projections. The main two objectives of the service will be to create consistent climate data series that will be in a data store and will be available to everyone. So to collect long series and to put them in a data store, but also to start sectoral information systems. So to use this data and to provide specific information in some fields. Some of these are already mentioned. Because all this data about climate change can be for sure helpful for any of these fields. And we can be even more inventive and think at even more areas where climate change information could be useful. And there I think there is also great potential for a downstream market, so really to base on the climate change in order to provide information that could be useful in all these areas. Then the emergency management service. Here I will spend maybe a little bit more time because it will be not covered later. Here we are looking to two parts. So flood forecasts, and actually in two areas, flood and forest fire. So we can look into potential anticipation of flood risks, and is one of the two areas where we're working. And the other one is about fire, so to identify areas where the likelihood that the fire can happen. And this is why we are looking into this element. Anticipate is not meaning that it will happen, but it's also a way to mitigate then a kind of a risk. But then, when something is happening, it can be floods, fires, but it can be many other things. It can be typhoons, tsunamis, earthquakes, and so on. We can provide support to emergency, to civil protection and other emergency entities that have to intervene. So by providing particular situation maps, reference information, and so on. And so we can cover. So if you look to the three phases of emergency, with what I said, I think we are working on the preparedness and prevention with the early warning part. Emergency response, so we can provide maps after something can happen, and then recovery, so we can also have maps in order to see what's going on. These are some of the products that are generated. So you see some products in the earthquake in Nepal, tropical cyclone, and so on. These can be found in our website. And here some statistics of how these on the different activations that have been provided by the emergency mapping service, and you see what are the areas and where these have been activated, either in Europe or rest of the world, because we can activate this also all over the world. Security service. There are three application areas, as I mentioned before, so border surveillance, maritime surveillance, and support to external action. And these are the areas where we are concluding our delegation agreements to provide information in this area. Particularly important at this moment, and where there is a lot of attention, is the border surveillance activity. So, just a few additional elements. They are more, I would say, governance issue. The current MFF stands for Multi-Annual Financial Framework, so actually we're speaking about money. In the period 2014-2020, is there, and in order to provide the full operationalization of the system. And there is a ramp-up phase of all the services. We hope that the cruise speed will be reached by 2017. But we are also to start, and this is our job, once we reach something, we are ready to think, and it's also my homework in some way, to provide what next. So never possible to sit back and say how good we are, but we have also to think how to improve it and make it sustainable in the longer term. In the new commission, so Juncker, our president, selected 10 priorities. This is main policy. What is good there is that we could identify at least 5 of the 10 where Copernicus can never really have a say. Boost new jobs and growth, connected digital single market, strengthen industrial base, new policy on migration, stronger global actor, and there are even others speaking about climate change, energy issues, and so on. So I think we are in a good situation to say we are really inside the priorities of what the European Union is doing at this moment. As I said in the beginning, data, our main issue at this moment is we have many data. So when the Sentinel-1, 2 and 3 will be fully operational, we'll have approximately 8 terabytes per day. And now the issue is how, as we do that full open and free, was mentioned before, we have to make sure that these data are produced and made available to everyone. And for this one, for the time being, there are capacities of access through different hubs that are generated at this moment. And in case, I think in the further presentation, you can have more details about this. So the big data challenge is really to make the data available to everyone. And there are two main things. So bring data to the users, in some way make systems that are bringing data to the final users, but at the same time bringing the user to the data. So having some computational capacities in the archives so that the user doesn't have to bring all the data in his office to treat them, but they can do some computing directly in the archives and retrieve just the final result. This is things on which we are working and should be improved in the short, medium term. And for this reason, we are working into that. We are a task force running at this moment really on ground segment aspects, so infrastructure aspect, how to bring the data to the users, but also the big data, how to improve these elements. So as a conclusion, Copernicus can produce significant socioeconomic and strategic and political benefits for Europe. I hope that I've convinced you about that. And we are convinced that the data we have can help to better, more complete, consistent, timely, and reliable information in order to take the right decision. It puts Europe at the forefront in space systems and initiatives which provide bargaining power and more successful implementation of external policies in areas such as climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and so on. I would simply say, and as I said in the beginning, when Copernicus will be totally operational, there will be no other country in the world having such a program. So I think that today we can be proud, so from our side, but the European Space Agency, member states, everyone who participated in the generation of this program to have a unique thing and to work together in order to make it even more effective in the future. So I conclude with Tag.
Thank you, Mauro. There is still time for some questions if you have. Microphones will be circulated around the audience.
I'm nice, so you can ask questions.
Useful overview. I would like to ask a little bit more about the cloud computing. What is the status, and is this related to the Helix Nebula Science Cloud?
So this is quite technical question. We are looking into that. So it's true that when we speak about big data, and in particular remote computing, this is an issue. So we are looking at two aspects. One is how to better store the data. I didn't enter into details about co-ground segment, collaborative ground segment, because this is too much related to those involved in these discussions. But at the same time, how this data can fly around Europe. And then we are getting into this cloud issue. We are looking into this Helix Nebula possibility. We are looking to what others are doing. I mean, we are aware that probably the United States is much advanced than us in this respect. I think that in a few months we cannot recover what Google has done in 10 years, so it would be a dream. But we are discussing with all the entities that are competent in this area, also with our DG, Director General Connect, where they are looking in these cloud possibilities to see what can be done at European level. So to reproduce what has been done with Géant for the physical internet capacity to reproduce it, something similar as a cloud solution.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Ann Jenvik. I come from a company called ESD, Energy, Environment and Sustainable Development. You had a slide in the beginning talking about improve environmental policy effectiveness. My question is the connections to the Sustainable Development Goals. Have you looked into that? And if so, is there any document, any paper written on the more specific links on who should be able to use what data and information? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Alan, is it okay if I leave it to you later? So you will have the reply after me. Because as Alan is dealing mostly with the global land aspect, and is also linking with these global issues, I think he will, in order not to monopolize all the discussion, I think he could reply also to this element.
Okay. Anyone else? I have a question for you, Mauro. You mentioned that the final products often consist of not just the remote sensing data, but also in situ, and not just sentinel data, but also from the contributing missions. So, what do you do right now in order to harmonize data policies between different data sources in order to facilitate the production of the final products?
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. It's true that one of our borderlines that we have to respect is also the Inspire Directive. So we try to have all the data that are generated, in particular out of the services that are Inspire compliant. Concerning the rest, for the Sentinel, it's true we have a complete control of the products, how they are generated. For the contributing missions, for the time being, there is no regulation regulating all the standards of these data. It's a challenge also for the users in order to collect all this data and to produce, and in order to generate final products in an harmonized way. What's happening at this moment is that we concentrated mostly on the generation of the data, both from the Sentinels and of the services, to have a kind of midterm review in the range of 2017 and to see what are the elements that should be possibly corrected. There will be for sure several. One may be this issue about the harmonization of the products. It's in any case an issue that we are considering when we look into our archives. We would like also to have the data that are available in the most user-friendly way. An example, we are looking at this moment for Sentinel-2 level 2 data, how this could be generated, but at the same time, if it's possible to have some common use, let's say with Landsat data, in order that users of this kind of data could use both and not find a complete change from one set to the other.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mauro.